Success doesn't announce itself. It's subtle. You don't hear the fanfare. It just quietly shifts your routine. Meetings with the right people become regular. Your emails get responses faster. Your ideas are no longer questioned before they're heard. After securing the logistics contract, Julian and I moved into a modest office downtown. No frills, just 2 rooms with good light, exposed brick, and enough space for 4 desks. I started attending industry meetups, not to seek work, but to offer something valuable. I was no longer the fallen executive fighting to prove myself. I was a business owner carving out my place in the industry. Julian thrived with the stability. Once freed from handling everything himself, he became more focused and creative. He took care of the technical side, while I focused on the business strategy. Together, we started to move forward. Then, the Mid-Atlantic Tech Leadership Summit came up. I wasn't planning on going, but one of our clients gave us VIP passes and encouraged us to make a splash. So, I went alone. I didn't expect to see him there. Andrew. He hadn't changed much. A little grayer, still trying too hard with the same flashy suit. He was laughing loudly, trying to grab attention. But I could tell there was tension in his posture, a hint of nerves behind the bravado. He didn't see me, not yet. I turned and walked the other way. It wasn't avoidance, it was control. I didn't need to react to his presence. I could wait for the right moment. That moment came later in the day when I was on a panel about women in leadership. The panel was different from others I'd attended. These women weren't about performing or giving the usual answers. We discussed failure, rebuilding, and the importance of creating your own place at the table rather than waiting to be invited. Afterward, a few attendees came up to chat. Some wanted to connect, others just thanked me for my insights. And then I saw him again. Andrew. He walked toward me with that familiar, forced confidence. I didn't move. Isabella, he said, stopping a few feet away, didn't expect to see you here. Likewise, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. A brief silence. He seemed to fidget, looking around. Then he spoke. I heard you started your own consulting business, he said, trying to sound casual. It's more than just consulting now, I replied, watching his expression closely. He nodded, trying to mask his discomfort. Good for you. Another awkward pause. I could see the gears turning in his head, trying to figure out what I knew, what he had left hidden. Listen, he said finally, his voice low. I just wanted to say, sorry, for how everything went down, for not backing you up with the board. I know you probably think I threw you under the bus. I didn't respond right away. I just looked at him, steady and calm. I don't think it, I said finally. I know it. He flinched, and for a moment, I saw the old Andruth, one who tried to manipulate every situation to suit him. Andrew's betrayal wasn't just the result of a single act. It was the culmination of months of backstabbing, lies, and careful manipulation. He had once been my ally. We spent so much time together we weren't just colleagues, we were close friends. Or at least, that's what I thought. But as the pressure mounted, Andrew revealed himself to be someone who would throw anyone under the bus to save his own skin. It all came crashing down during a crucial board meeting. The company was facing a decision that could make or break us, and I had a strong proposal loan that could have changed the direction of the entire business. But instead of standing by me, Andrew quietly sided with the others on the board who were skeptical of my plan. He let them undermine me in front of everyone, knowing full well I was right, but choosing to protect his own position. When the vote passed without my proposal being considered, it wasn't just a professional setback, it was a personal betrayal. Andrew's lack of support meant that the very foundation I had built was at risk, and the trust we had shared evaporated in that moment. But that wasn't the worst of it. After the meeting, I found out that Andrew had gone behind my back, privately discussing my weaknesses with others on the board. He had fueled their doubts about me, further isolating me and ensuring that I was left alone to fight a battle I couldn't win. His betrayal cut deep. It wasn't just about losing a business deal, it was about losing someone I had trusted, someone I had believed had my back. And when I confronted him about it, all he did was apologize in that empty, dismissive way of his. I had to do what was best for me, he'd said. I never wanted to hurt you, but I had to protect myself. It was clear then. I was nothing more than a pawn in his game. And when I walked away from that job, from the company, from everything, it was the hardest thing I'd ever done. But in the end, it was also the best decision I had ever made. I didn't need him. I didn't need anyone like him in my life. But here he was now, in front of me. And as I stood there, listening to his apology, I realized something: his words didn't matter anymore. The pain he had caused me had already been buried under the foundation I was building now. What he had done was awful, but it no longer had the power to dictate my future. "Thank you for the apology, Andrew," I said, finally breaking the silence. "But I've moved on. You don't need to keep carrying that guilt. It's over." He blinked, clearly shocked by my response, and for a moment, I saw him waver like he wasn't sure what to say next. "Goodbye, Andrew," I added, and without another word I turned and walked away. As the months passed, we kept building slowly but steadily. Julian and I worked tirelessly, but things started to feel different. We were no longer just trying to survive in the industry. We were starting to carve out a space for ourselves. The new clients were coming in, one by one, not big corporations, but well-established companies with real needs and a willingness to trust us with their operations. We didn't overpromise, we simply delivered. Word of mouth spread, and we were getting attention, the kind that mattered. Our office was small, but it was our own. Julian had hired another engineer, and we brought on an operations manager who was smart and efficient. Slowly, the pieces began to fall into place. I was running the day-to-day while Julian worked on refining our tech solutions. We didn't need to be the biggest or the flashiest, we just needed to be reliable. One afternoon, while I was in a meeting with a potential client, I got a call. It was from my mother. My heart dropped. She only called me like this when something was wrong. I stepped outside to take the call. Her voice was strained. "Isabella, your father, he's been admitted to the hospital." I froze for a moment. My father had always been in good health. This felt out of nowhere. I managed to stay calm on the phone, asking the questions I needed to. When I hung up, I felt a mix of concern and helplessness. It had been years since I'd had any real contact with my parents. The emotional distance was something I had accepted over time. But this was different. I couldn't ignore it. I called Julian and told him I needed to take a few days off. He was understanding, of course. I wasn't used to letting personal matters interfere with business, but this was family. I flew home the next day. The hospital was a long drive from the small town where I grew up, and as I approached my parents' house, memories of my childhood came rushing back. I hadn't been back in years, not since I left for college. The streets felt strangely familiar, yet distant, as if they belonged to a different version of me. When I walked into the hospital room, I saw my father lying there, hooked up to machines. It was a surreal feeling. This was the man who had been larger than life to me. Now, he looked fragile and vulnerable. His eyes fluttered open as I entered, and he gave me a weak smile. "Isabella," he whispered, his voice raspy. "It's good to see you." I sat beside him, unsure of what to say. The silence between us was thick. The years of strained conversations and unmet expectations loomed in the background. But I couldn't ignore the gravity of the situation. This wasn't about old resentments or our fractured relationship. My father was in pain, and whatever had happened between us didn't matter now. I stayed with him for a few days, helping where I could, even though the discomfort of our unresolved issues still lingered. I never thought about it until now, but family is a strange thing. We don't always get to choose who we're tied to. Sometimes it's just a part of the deal. You can try to move on, but there are always those ties that pull you back. Eventually, I flew back to the city, but the weight of my father's situation stayed with me. It forced me to confront a side of myself I'd been avoiding, the part that still cared, the part that wanted something more from the people who had failed me. But I couldn't let it derail everything I had worked for. I had my own life to live now. Back at the office, things were moving forward. Julian had secured another high-profile project, and I was dealing with the usual ups and downs of managing a growing business. But something in me had shifted. I began questioning the decisions I had made, especially the ones that led me to leave my past behind. Could I rebuild those relationships, or was I just too far gone? In the midst of this personal turmoil, I got another call. It was from Andrew. I hadn't expected to hear from him again. Our brief interaction at the conference was supposed to be the last, but there he was, on the other end of the line. "Isabella, it's Andrew," he said, sounding a bit too casual. "I wanted to reach out. I know things have been complicated between us, but I was hoping we could talk." I didn't say anything at first. Was I really ready to deal with him again? "I know this might sound strange," he continued, "but I've been thinking a lot about what happened, about the way I handled things with you, and I want to apologize. I don't expect forgiveness, but I do want you to know that I regret how everything went down." I took a deep breath, trying to process what he was saying. For a moment, I thought about hanging up, but something stopped me. "I appreciate that, Andrew," I said finally, "but I don't need an apology. The past is the past." There was silence on the other end of the line before he spoke again. I know, he said quietly. "But maybe we could work together again? I'm building something new, something that could benefit both of us." I wasn't sure if I was being naive, but something about his tone seemed genuine. It made me reconsider. Was there an opportunity here? Was it worth taking the risk to let someone like Andrew back into my life? But then I thought about everything I had worked for, the long nights, the late meetings, the sacrifice. I couldn't afford to go back to the way things were. "I'll think about it," I said, hanging up the phone. I didn't plan on taking him up on his offer, but the conversation lingered in my mind. It made me question my own growth. Was I still holding on to old grudges, or had I truly moved on? Back at the office, I decided to focus on what really mattered. My business. We had come so far. I wasn't going to let anyone pull me back into the mess of the past. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. I threw myself back into work, focusing on our projects and putting any thoughts of Andrew, my father, or anything from the past behind me. There was no time for distractions. Julian and I had built something solid, and I wasn't about to jeopardize it by looking back. One of the biggest projects we landed was with a tech startup in the healthcare industry. Their vision was ambitious, and they needed our help to streamline their operations and set up a tech infrastructure that could scale with their growth. It was the kind of opportunity that could propel us into a new league, and I was determined to make it work. Julian and I met with the team from the startup a few times, and while the work was challenging, it was the kind of challenge I thrived on. The long hours felt like second nature now. We were building something that mattered, and that kept me going. But despite all the success, something inside me started to stir. It wasn't regret, but rather a gnawing feeling of unfulfilled potential. We were doing well, yes, but I couldn't shake the thought that I wasn't quite where I needed to be yet. I had come so far, but there were still pieces of the puzzle that didn't quite fit. And that's when I got an email from Andrew. It was short, to the point, and surprisingly direct. He wasn't asking for a meeting or trying to make amends. She was offering a partnership, a joint venture between our companies. His startup was expanding, and he thought we could help them scale their operations. It wasn't a huge opportunity, but it was an interesting one. I stared at the email for a long time, debating whether or not to respond. Part of me wanted to throw it in the trash and move on with my life, but another part of me wondered if maybe this was the test I needed. Not just for business, but for myself. How much had I really grown? Was I still the person who had been burned by him so many years ago? I replied to the email, asking for more details. Andrew's response came quickly. He was eager to meet in person, to discuss the potential collaboration. I set a meeting, but I wasn't sure what I was hoping for. The day of the meeting arrived, and I found myself walking into a sleek, modern office building, one of those places that screamed success, the kind of place I would have dreamed about years ago. The receptionist led me up to a glass-walled conference room where Andrew was already waiting. He was dressed in a sharp suit, looking every bit the part of the successful entrepreneur. "Isabella," he said with a smile, standing up to shake my hand. "Good to see you." "Likewise," I replied, keeping things cordial but distant. We sat down, and for the next hour we discussed the potential for collaboration. On paper, it seemed like a good opportunity, but there was something about it that didn't sit right with me. I could see that Andrew was still Andrew, charming, slick, but still a bit too eager to sell me on his idea. There was no real trust there, no foundation. As the meeting came to an end, Andrew leaned forward. "I know we've had our differences in the past, Isabella, but I truly believe this could work. And maybe, just maybe, we could finally build something together." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I just looked at him, weighing my options. On the one hand, it could be a chance to leverage his connections and resources. On the other hand, it could be a step back, a risk, a gamble. When I left the meeting, I didn't feel exhilarated or excited. I felt nothing. A strange emptiness, like I was standing at a crossroads with no clear path forward. Something in my gut told me it wasn't the right move, so I turned Andrew's offer down. Instead, I doubled down on what we were building. Julian and I focused on the clients we had, working hard to refine our services and expand our reach. Over time, we brought on more staff people who shared our vision and believed in what we were doing. Slowly but surely, our reputation grew. We weren't making waves, but we were steadily becoming known in the industry. The world has a way of testing you when you least expect it. Just when things were starting to feel like they were finally falling into place, another curveball came hurtling my way. We had a new client, a massive one. It was an international brand, well-established and expanding rapidly. They needed help with a global strategy, and they'd come to us for that. Julian and I were thrilled. This was the kind of client that could catapult us into the big leagues, the kind that made everyone take notice. But with that opportunity came the pressure, the kind that builds up so slowly, you don't even realize it's happening until you're drowning in it. We had a tight deadline, the team was small, and the demands from the client were growing by the day. Every time we thought we'd cleared a hurdle, another challenge emerged. It wasn't just the workload that was overwhelming. The stakes were higher now, and the tension was palpable. Everyone on the team, including Julian, was feeling it. We were all working late nights, skipping meals, and constantly checking emails and messages. One day, as I was sitting in the office, surrounded by stacks of paperwork, I found myself staring at the clock. It was almost midnight, and I was still working through the same report I had started hours ago. My fingers were stiff from typing, and my eyes felt like they were burning from staring at the screen for too long. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes for a moment, trying to clear my head. That's when the phone rang. It was Julian. I sighed, half expecting him to ask for another update or a solution to one of the many problems we were facing. But when I answered, his voice sounded off. There was something strange in his tone, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. "Izzy, we need to talk." I froze. That wasn't what I expected to hear. "Is something wrong?" I asked, already on edge from the pressure of the project. "It's not about the work," he said. "It's about us. I think we need to reassess things." My heart dropped into my stomach. My mind raced. Was he leaving the company? Was he unhappy? "I don't understand," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "What do you mean, reassess?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line before he spoke again. "I've been thinking a lot lately about the direction we're headed, and I think maybe we're getting a bit too caught up in this rush for success. Are we doing this for the right reasons, Isabella?" I felt the weight of his words. He wasn't wrong. I had been so focused on pushing forward, on proving myself and building this company, that I hadn't stopped to ask myself why I was doing it in the first place. Was I doing it for validation? Was I doing it to escape something else? "I know it's hard," I said quietly, my voice betraying the exhaustion I felt. "But we're this close, Julian. We can't give up now." "I'm not talking about giving up," he said. "I'm talking about finding balance. We're burning ourselves out, Izzy, and that's not sustainable. It's not just about the clients or the deals. It's about us, the team, our well-being, our values." I took a deep breath. He was right. In the race for success, I had forgotten the very reason I had started this journey in the first place. I had wanted to build something meaningful, something I could be proud of. But along the way, I had lost sight of the balance that made all of this worthwhile. "I hear you," I said after a moment. "Maybe we need to slow down a bit, reevaluate, take a step back." That conversation marked a turning point. Julian and I spent the next few days reflecting on everything that had led us here, on the long hours, the stress, and the sacrifices we had made. We realized that we couldn't keep pushing ourselves to the brink just for the sake of success. We needed to take care of ourselves, of each other, and of the values that had driven us to this point. We decided to take a short break from the project, to step away and recalibrate. We sent a message to the client, explaining the situation and assuring them that we would be able to continue once we had regrouped. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right one. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting more on my own journey. I thought about the years I had spent fighting against the odds, about the people who had doubted me and the ones who had walked away. I thought about my father and Andrew, about the betrayal and the pain that had shaped me into who I was today. But through it all, one thing had remained constant. I had never given up. No matter what life had thrown at me, I had always kept moving forward. And now, as I stood at the threshold of something bigger than I had ever imagined, I knew that I had to keep that same resilience, but I also had to be careful. I had to find the balance between ambition and self-preservation. The next time we met with the client, I felt a sense of calm. We were ready. We had taken the time we needed to reassess and realign ourselves, and it made all the difference. The project wasn't easy, but we handled it with the professionalism and care it deserved. As we delivered the final proposal, I couldn't help but feel a quiet satisfaction. We had done it. Not because we had pushed ourselves to the limit, but because we had worked smart, with purpose and integrity, and that made all the difference. In the weeks following the meeting with the client, things started to settle. The chaos that had gripped our lives began to fade, replaced by a calmer, more controlled rhythm. Julian and I found a renewed sense of purpose, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was actually living instead of just surviving. But no success comes without its shadows. As things progressed, I found myself facing another unexpected challenge, one I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't a client, a deal, or even a problem with the business itself. It was something far more personal. One afternoon, out of the blue, I received an email from Andrew, and when I saw his name in my inbox, I felt a mix of curiosity and caution. I clicked open the email, and there it was, his apology. "Isabella," it started. "I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again. I've been reflecting on everything, on how I treated you, how I betrayed your trust, and the mistakes I made. I've spent a long time thinking about our past, and I know I can't change it, but I need to let you know how truly sorry I am. I hope you're doing well. I know I don't deserve it, but I'd love the chance to talk again, to apologize in person. Please let me know if you'd be open to that." The email sat there in my inbox, unanswered for several days. I wasn't sure how to respond. On one hand, I felt a strange sense of closure, knowing that Andrew had come to terms with his actions and was asking for forgiveness. But on the other hand, I wasn't sure if I was ready to open that door again. I had moved on. I had built something for myself, something real. I had found peace. The last thing I wanted was to revisit that painful chapter. But there was something else, a small voice in the back of my mind, telling me that I owed it to myself to at least consider his request. After all, my journey had been about facing the truth, confronting my past, and growing from it. Could I truly say I had healed if I refused to acknowledge the part of me that still felt anger, betrayal, and hurt? I replied to the email, asking for a meeting. I didn't know what I was expecting, but I felt like I needed to hear him out. I wanted to hear what he had to say. It had been years, after all. Maybe this was a final step in letting go. We met at a small cafe downtown, the kind of place that was quiet enough to talk but still had a hint of bustle in the background. When I walked in, I saw him sitting at a table near the back. He looked older, more worn than I remembered, but still the same in many ways. He looked up when he saw me, and for a moment, there was that familiar flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "Isabella," he said, his voice tentative. "Thank you for meeting with me." I nodded, not sure what to say. I had no expectations. I wasn't looking for an apology. I wasn't looking for anything from him anymore. We talked for a long time. At first it was awkward. He apologized again, repeated his regret, and explained how he had come to realize the weight of his actions. I listened quietly, absorbing his words. But then something shifted. As I listened, I realized that he wasn't the same person I had once known. The arrogance, the self-assurance that had always defined him, those things were gone. In their place was a man who seemed genuinely sorry, genuinely aware of how much he had hurt me. And for the first time, I understood something that had eluded me all these years. My anger toward him had always been about my own need for validation, for proving that I was worthy, for getting the recognition I deserved. But that validation no longer mattered to me. I had found my own path, my own sense of worth. "Andrew," I said after a long silence, "I appreciate your apology, I do, but you don't need to keep carrying this guilt. You've apologized. I've moved on." His eyes softened, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of relief. "I'm glad to hear that," he said quietly. "I never wanted to hurt you. I wasn't strong enough back then." I nodded. We were both different people then. We both made mistakes. And that was it. The weight of the past was finally lifted. We parted ways that day with a sense of closure, and I left the cafe feeling lighter than I had in years. But the most surprising part was that, in some strange way, Andrew's apology had been the final piece of the puzzle for me. I had spent so long holding on to the anger, the resentment, thinking that I needed to get revenge, to prove that I was better than the person who had betrayed me. But in the end, The best form of revenge had been living well, not just surviving, but truly thriving. Building a life that no one, not even Andrew, could take away from me. In the months that followed, I watched as my business continued to grow. We secured more clients, developed new strategies, and slowly but surely, we became known as a trusted name in the industry. My team was more committed than ever, and Julian and I had found a rhythm that worked for us. The tension had eased, and for the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. And then, one day, I got a call from my father. It had been a while since we had spoken, and I was surprised to hear from him. His voice on the other end of the line was cautious, almost hesitant. "Isabella," he said, "I've been thinking a lot about everything. About the way things ended between us. I know I wasn't the father you needed. And I've heard about your business. I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you." I didn't know how to respond at first. Part of me wanted to be angry, to remind him of the years he had been absent, of the damage he had done, but then I realized something: I didn't need his approval anymore. I had built something for myself, something real, and I didn't need his recognition to validate that. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady. "I appreciate that." And with that, I realized that the full circle had come to completion. The success, the growth, the hard work, it had all paid off. Not just professionally, but personally. I had healed. I had let go. And in the end, that was the most satisfying revenge of all.